of the head. They didn't even have a gun out. They did not have a gun out. Then he escaped to his sister's house where there was an AK-47 waiting for him, his wonderful sister. And when the tax squad went to apprehend the perpetrator who just shot two white policemen, he opened fire with his AK-47, killing 2 more members of the police force of Oakland, California. And so I was wrecked by this. I didn't know any of these guys. I donated, I think, $30,000 to their families. I believe I gave $7,500 to each one of them. Then I found out one of them was not married, so we gave $10,000 instead to each of 3 of my money to them. See, I put my money where my mouth is. So before you start talking about a poor, oppressed black professor in Cambridge, Massachusetts, why don't you pause and talk about the dead policemen who are dead because of rules of engagement established by the Henry Louis Gates Jr.'s of America, who have said that every cop is a pig, every cop is a racist, white cops are out to get blacks. Okay, think about it and get back to me. I'll be right back.
The Wall Street Journal this morning, weekdays 5 to 6 a.m. on Talk 910 KNEW.
Now, the new headline is swine flu could hit up to 40% in the U.S. This is being put out by the Centers for Disease Control, and it's pure propaganda. And it's the federal government trying to scare you into needing them at the time of a health care reform bill. Don't you see this? Swine flu could hit up to 40% in the U.S., and who's going to save you? Dr. Obama is going to save you. Because they're saying that without a successful vaccine campaign, you're liable to get the flu and die. So you understand how this all works. The government media complex is operating even with regard to the flu. They're putting out a false story now. 40% are going to get the flu. And that you need their vaccine. The government needs the vaccine. And that they're going to test it soon. I'll tell you right now, I go to jail before I take the flu vaccine. I'll lay it right on the line here. If the federal government says it's mandatory, I go to jail before I take the flu vaccine. I would not let them stick a needle in me from the federal government. You like this? Health officials say flu cases may explode in the fall when schools open and become germ factories, and that they need to have vaccines and other measures in place before then. U.S. expects to begin testing on some volunteers in August, with 160 million doses ready in October. They're going to say it's perfectly safe. Anyone who opposes it is a communist or a right-wing fearmonger. But to me, I'll tell you right now, I'm not taking the flu vaccine. Now you say, well, why are you talking about influenza? I'll tell you why. Because this could have been avoided almost entirely had Janet Napolitano and Obama not opened the door to a furtherance of this epidemic. Now, do you remember when this started in Mexico? And I went on the radio and I said, this is contained in Mexico, close the borders, put the National Guard on the border. And what? Do you remember what happened the next day in the media? They started screaming that anyone who said that is a racist. Then they covered up their tracks with that. It's a Henry Louis Gates Jr. game. The first rule of a liberal is scream racism. No matter what whatever anyone says that you disagree with, say they're a racist. If that doesn't work, the next they come up with some other syllogism that makes no sense. So after saying it was racist to say close the border with Mexico, then Janet Napolitano, the head of Homeland Security, has the nerve to say it would make no difference if we closed the border and ended tourism, et cetera, and traveled back and forth to Mexico. She said because the horse is already out of the barn. That is the stupidest thing I ever heard, and I said it to you on this show. Why? Because there were many more horses who still had the virus who could come across the border, and they did. They didn't stop coming across the border. This should rightly be called the Mexican flu. Remember, there used to be a disease called the Asian flu, and then they stopped it because they didn't want you to put 2 and 2 together that it was coming from Asia. So they gave it like H1903 or 504, 902 or 103. They started giving it numbers so you wouldn't understand that the diseases cross borders. And the way they cross borders is with an open borders policy. The last thing that the globalists want you to think about is a secure border, because then you'll start thinking about your nation and how the gangsters who are running the country have erased your borders, are erasing your language, and erasing your culture. So let's go back again to the swine flu. It started in Mexico with one Mexican kid. In fact, they're erecting a statue to him in the town in which he comes from. I think it's Sinaloa, Mexico. They're so proud of him having started the flu that they've erected a statue for him in his hometown. I forget his name. But let's go back again. This is government mishandling of an epidemic. And now they're going to further mishandle the epidemic by insisting on a massive swine flu inoculation campaign. When, number one, we don't know if the swine flu vaccine works. Number two, we don't know if there are any side effects in certain individuals from the swine flu vaccine. In other words, it's not been tested. But they have 160 million doses ready in October. Now, how much money do you think is going to be made on the swine flu epidemic from the federal level? We don't know. We know billions of dollars are going to be made, not only by the drug companies, but by the providers of the flu vaccine. You see how this works? Disease is one of the best providers of income ever invented. And so that's one of the reasons that you want open borders, is to make sure as much disease as possible comes across the border. Because that way you can panic the population and control them with vaccines and government programs, quarantines, and whatever. Because the swine flu virus is new, most people haven't developed an immunity to it. And most of the people who have died from it in the U.S. have had other health problems such as asthma. It is also occurring, it causes rather an unusual number of serious illnesses in teens and young adults, which is very odd in that seasonal flu usually is toughest on the elderly and very young children. So there it is. I gave you a little flu story right now. But the bottom line in this story is this. At the same time Obama is trying to push Obamacare, his CDC puts out a memo that says swine flu could hit up to 40% of the population and that you must have a vaccine, and without a vaccine you're liable to get the flu, etc., and you're liable to die. So what are they saying? You need government health care. You need a vaccine. Only the federal government can give you a vaccine. And if you don't pass Obamacare, the implication is you won't get your flu vaccine and you'll get sick and die. Now you understand what I mean by the beware the government media complex. Of course, you could say beware of the government medical complex. Or you could say beware of the medico-pharmaceutical complex. Or, you know, you could keep making up all sorts of things, whatever you want. Again, this is one man's opinion. I'm not taking a swine flu vaccine. I'd go to jail before I took it. That's all there is to it. That's me. It's my decision. I just won't do it. And I'm one of the elderly Americans. I'm not taking it. I'd rather use vitamin C and stay away from movie theaters and Obama rallies.
Savage. Michael Savage. Afternoons 3 to 7 on Talk 910 KNEW and online at 910KNEW.com.